Welcome to Your Strata Property, the podcast for property owners looking for reliable, accurate, and bite-sized information from an experienced and authoritative source. To access previous episodes and useful strata tips, go to www.yourstrataproperty.com.au.
Hello and welcome. I'm Amanda Farmer and this is Your Strata Property. Chris Sargent is the building manager of Whitehorse Towers, Melbourne's tallest residential complex outside of the central CBD. With 514 apartments, 100 hotel rooms, 3 restaurants, and a handful of small commercial tenancies. Whitehorse is a major landmark in Box Hill. Chris's background is primarily in building, construction and real estate. However, the last 4 years have seen him transition into facility building management. He now describes himself as being in his sweet spot and is living the dream. Outside of his role, Chris is a happily married father of 4 amazing young adults and is working towards completing his first Ironman in late 2020. Today, I am delighted to welcome Chris Sargent. Welcome, Chris.
Thank you, Amanda. It's been a delight to prepare for this. I'm thrilled to be here. I've used your resources just without shame. It's been fantastic, your generosity and how you've put all these resources out there for all of us that are working in the Strata community. And so I just want to say from the outset, thank you. It's just been a godsend. So thanks. And if I can help some of your listeners today with some insights from what it's like to be a building manager, happy to do so.
Absolutely. Well, thank you. I'm very glad that you are part of our tribe, our Your Strata Property tribe, and it's wonderful to have you here with us today. And that is indeed what we're talking about, building management. What is it all about? What are the great building managers doing? And you've had some very interesting experiences as a building manager, which we're going to get into. But I'm going to start by asking you, Chris, give us one misconception that Strata residents have about building managers, and can you clear up that misconception for us?
Yeah, it's a pretty simple one. Building managers look after common areas only. We don't look after what happens inside the apartment. So if your oven's on the blink, it's not in our scope to come in and do that. Now, we can point people in the right direction, but generally our role is to manage and take care of the common areas. And that's, I guess, a lot of my inquiries are about, can you come and fix my air conditioner, or my window winder's broken? And so there's a lot of internal requests that come my way. So,
is there ever confusion about that? I mean, I know in my experience, sometimes it's not clear where the line is between what is part of the common property and the responsibility of the building and what is part of the lot and the responsibility of the owner. Have you found in your experience sometimes that's a tricky question, or where you are at the moment at Whitehorse Towers, is that pretty straightforward?
No, look, sometimes it just needs explaining to people. There's some people that are moving into Strata for the first time. And an example might be the fire doors. So we have the front face of their apartment door that needs to be inspected. It's classified as common property. And how can you come into my apartment to examine it? So there's that kind of sort of grey area. But I think by and by, as you explain it to people and that it's for their benefit and for their safety, they're usually okay with you doing those kind of things. In the OC meetings, when we have the general ones, a lot of questions do come up about if there's multiple OCs in the Strata development, who's paying for what. And so you can really give your residents clear guidance on boundaries and responsibilities at that point.
You've just hit on something really key there, Chris, and that's about explaining to residents, whether it's in the context of them ringing you with a problem or you're sitting there in a meeting, explaining where the responsibilities lie And if they're new to Strata, this is not something they've experienced before, that can be really complicated and it may not be intuitive. But having those open lines of communication, it is something I talk about, I feel, constantly on the podcast, how important and helpful good communication is. And it's interesting to hear from the building manager's perspective, that is just as important as it is from a Strata manager's perspective or a committee, being able to answer those questions clearly and accurately for owners.
Yeah, one of the great things, Amanda, with a new building, and was very excited to be offered this role, was to set it from the ground up. Now, I was probably a little bit late coming in 4 months after it had opened up, but the implementation of building management software, we run My Boss here, and that has a community portal focus to it. And so there's the ability for the building manager to put all the documents pertaining to the building in that portal for the resident to then look up. So all manuals for everything that's ever installed in their apartment, including the warranties and plan of subdivision, everything's in there for the person to have a look and see, well, okay, this is the doc I'm looking for. So it saves me a lot of time too, and it just means that the information's there for everyone.
Yep.
It's a great thing.
Excellent. Got to love technology when we can be achieving things like that.
Yeah, that's it.
Now tell us, Chris, you've been in the job for a few years now. What do you say is the difference between a great building manager and a building manager who's just okay?
I would dare to say that the way the building manager personally presents themselves in their dress and grooming, it's almost we set the minimum standard, as far as if we're presenting ourselves poorly, well, our trades think, he doesn't care. But, if we ordered and we present neat and tidy, hair combed, with a little bit of product, then I think that reflects on everyone from your cleaners to your contractors to your residents, that you care about yourself and their building. I think a good building manager is willing to listen and to be wrong. It's not always right being wrong, but it's an important part to be and to admit when you are wrong. As a relative newcomer to facility management, I've been wrong on more than one occasion and caused a few problems. But the good thing is that I've come clean, I've admitted my mistakes, and I've worked to fix those areas. And my OC committees have responded to that. So I think that that's a good trait to have. And being flexible. I've been helping a guy who's just moved into his first BM role, and I describe being a building manager as being a mixture of sheriff, mayor and councillor. In fact, I was going to ask you, cue up the good, the bad and the ugly music, because it's a little bit like that, because you have the rules and regulations which you've got to police, which people are expecting you to do that. And it's not always easy to do that. There's sensitivities, you have cultural sensitivities, and you get, these are people's lives, people's homes. So you get all the issues that are associated with that. And so sometimes you just need to be a counsellor and listen. I think good building managers somehow manage to keep all those moving parts moving, and it's a challenging role, but
yes,
it's very rewarding.
Yeah, indeed. You've given us there some great tips for building managers, for aspiring building managers, and also for committees and for owners who are looking for a building manager, what to look for and who it's going to be who's going to make your life easier. Because the way I see it as an owner, that's really what I want from a building manager, to do those things that I can't do or that I shouldn't be doing or that just won't get done unless somebody else does them, and to make my experience of apartment living much smoother and much more enjoyable. So I think all of those things would definitely lead to that result if you have that excellent building manager in place. Now, Chris, I know that you were the building manager at La Crosse Apartments when the fire happened. Now, if you don't mind sharing a bit about that experience, particularly what you learned as a building manager in that unique situation.
Well, it was my first foray into residential building management.
Wow.
And it was an experience. It was very traumatic, seeing people that you see on a regular daily basis have their lives just turned upside down. The thing that struck me most about the fire was how much damage water does. It was just breathtaking, the amount of damage that the water caused to the whole facility. What was perplexing, Amanda, and many building managers and many strata owners we all have issues with cigarette butts. I've just recently, I think I listened to one of your podcasts on smoking, stopping smoking in your buildings, and have been employing some of those suggestions within it. But at La Crosse, which the fire was caused by a cigarette butt, 2 weeks preceding the fire, we put notices in the lift with a picture of an inferno saying, "Don't throw your butts out the window." Because I'd spend, an hour every week just cleaning butts off the rooftop.
God.
And sure enough, there it was. And so it was pretty horrifying, horrendous. What if there was an upside, Amanda? It was that no one got injured, no one got hurt. We had people that required assistance on level 8 get out with no trouble. So as far as having all the procedures and policies and practices under everyone's belt, it worked as it was supposed to. But it was an accident that could have been avoided. But I'll leave that for the VBA and other people to make their calls on that.
And have you found that you have taken any of the learnings, the experience that you had dealing with that emergency into your next role and the role that you're in now with Whitehorse Towers? Is there anything in terms of communications or preparation for disaster or managing that emergency situation that you feel like you're using now in your role?
I'm far more vigilant on cigarette butts and smoking, and I take any complaint of smoking or cigarette butts very seriously and seek to address that same day, just because it does concern me. Now, our cladding here is great, certified, so the risk of fire is very low, but nevertheless, if you're living out in a balcony, it's reasonable to expect that you're not going to be covered in a hail of ash and cigarette butts. So, I think people need to change some of their habits. So we have a lot of Airbnbs here as well.
Right. And
so, it's educating them as well as they come in about disposing of their butts appropriately. Other things, I guess, is communicating to the other team here about what can happen and how to respond in the case of an emergency. So we have drills here. We have a lot of hotel staff with our cleaners and the hotel staff as well. We have the restaurants. So just being able to communicate to them first-hand experience.
Yep.
And it seems to resonate with them that, I'm not kidding, these are serious things and we need to move calmly and coolly out and let the fire people do their job. And they do a fantastic job too.
Now, you've mentioned there, Chris, Airbnb, and it is a large development there. You've got hotels. I'm not sure whether the Airbnb is happening in the apartments on a service department basis or how that works. But from your perspective as a building manager, what's the difference when it comes to dealing with those shorter term tenants and they're coming in, they're turning over quickly, they may not necessarily know how to use the facilities, what all the rules are. How do you manage them differently to, for example, the owner-occupier who's bought in, going to live there for the foreseeable future? What are the issues that crop up with these short-term Airbnb stays?
Swipe keys is probably the biggest issue.
Yep.
And parking. I push a lot back onto the agent representing the Airbnb.
Right.
Now, I suppose we probably should refer to them as short-stay rental agreements and those providers. So I push back to them a bit because it's not all just Airbnb.
Yep.
And their responsibility to educate their guests as to the appropriate way to enter the building, exit the building, and what those requirements are. I do charge, if they lose their swipe, I'll charge them for a new one. Sometimes if they can provide no ID, they won't be getting back to wherever it was. They'll have to contact their agent. We get some guests will treat the hotel front desk as their own Airbnb front desk. And so they'll go there and say, I've got no towels. Can you get some towels? So, yeah, it gets a bit funny at times. The hotel have been really good about it, but, it's a challenge.
Now, I know, Chris, that you've also worked with buildings, and I'm not sure if Whitehorse is still in this situation, but buildings who are in the middle of a defects liability period. So these are brand new builds, builder is done, and as part of the building contract, there is a period at the end where the builder comes back and fixes defects and problems, big, small, usually small. The big ones tend to get ignored. Can you explain to us what is a defects liability period from your perspective as a building manager? What role do you play during that period?
Yes, it's a good question, Amanda. It's funny, the builder thinks the building's done, but it isn't done. We've been very fortunate here. The builder, Maxcom, has been very attentive to all defects that have been put to them. The defect liability period runs 12 months from when the occupancy permit was issued. I think it was 3 months prior to the liability period coming to an end. We engaged the building surveyor back to do a complete audit on the building, and we were given a list of areas that needed attending to. And so we just chipped away at those things and have got ourselves in a position where all the defects have been attended to or are in the process still of being attended to. But certainly it can be challenging at times. It can be, well, that's not my job, or that's that tradesperson. But, I feel for the builder at times if one of their tradespersons has let them down. But at the end of the day, the OC are entitled to have things functioning as they ought and be in a good working order. And if it's not, then it needs to be made good. So, yeah.
Now, in a development with 514 apartments, how do you coordinate residents who need to give access to their apartments for the builder to come back and have a look, to inspect reported defects? And I imagine that you would have residents who maybe haven't been available to open up their apartment and may complain later, well, I had a problem but nobody came to look at it, or I had a problem but I didn't realise it until after. How do you deal with that on the ground? Because that's something that I see clients struggling with, strata managers struggling with, just coordinating that whole process. And in such a huge development, I imagine that's a big job.
Yeah, it's a huge job, and it's almost outside the scope of a building manager's role. But as I said, one of the things with being a good or great building manager is that willingness to be flexible, to go out and do those things that are necessary. And it's not going to be forever. And so it's just creates goodwill, it creates community. So by and large, I've assisted the builder with coordinating with either the tenants. Now, we have of my 514 apartments, I would say maybe 400 of them are leased. I have an occupancy here of 95% Chinese. Box Hill is a very Chinese-orientated community. So we have the language issues as well. So I have used my leasing team at times to communicate to the residents. And so we just organise it up. We line our jobs up, and if the resident is unable to give access to the tradesperson, then we usually seek permission so that we can create access for them. So we use the master keys, and that seems to work well. Because they've got to value the tradesperson's time as well. And, if there's some toilet issues on one, there might be toilet issues on 10. So let's line them up. So it's a cost-effective way of repairing things.
Yeah, and there's a real practical benefit there of having a building manager in place, that you can leave your keys, or the master key can be used to permit access for trades at any time, whether it's in a defects liability period or whether there's a major works upgrade project going on, or there is just a leak coming from one to the other. Having somebody on site who you know, who you trust, you're not having to leave things with a neighbour who you might not be comfortable with, or stay home from work. Having a building manager like you there, Chris, that's a big bonus, I think.
Yeah. Well, a classic example, man, just recently, a couple of our residents, they went overseas, over to England, and left their windows open on the 28th floor. And the window arms aren't designed to sustain 80 kilometre an hour winds.
Yes.
And as a result, they broke.
Oh.
And so I've got big sheets of glass awning flapping around, and it was quite scary for the residents below and above, hearing this banging noise. So having the keys and being able to access it and provide prompt response to it, to shut the windows, was really critical, and I'm glad we had it.
Yep, lucky you were there.
Indeed.
All right, Chris, I know you are an avid listener to the podcast, so you will be ready for this question. What books have had the greatest impact on you, and why?
Well, I'm wondering whether I could just say something. What episodes of Your Strata Property have had the most effect?
Love it. Love it.
Yeah.
Go for it.
I'm going to I'll go back to episode 91. 91 was a lawyer from Western Australia who said, don't copy and paste the Court of Appeal victory.
Yes, that was Mark Atkinson from WA talking about the Sarissa River Supreme Court case on a short stay bylaw. Yes,
correct. And your discussion with Tim Graham in episode 136. I just love listening to Tim because it boosts my vocabulary. I have to listen to him with a dictionary.
We all do, don't worry. We get our dictionaries out when he emails us. So that's Tim Graham, who is a lawyer in Victoria, and he's also the president of the Australian College of Strata Lawyers, on episode 136, talking about the black case and discrimination in our buildings, whether we need to upgrade our common property to deal with disabilities, and if we don't, is that discriminatory? So, yeah, another one of my favourite episodes.
And 142, your question and answer from your was a meeting you had where you actually had it, but it was great. You really hit the nail on the head with some of the questions and answers. It was great.
Thank you. I think that was my presentation for Veronica Morgan and her company Good Deeds.
That's right.
Yep.
Yes, very good. But look, my favourite book that I guess has helped turn my life around was A Fortunate Life by A.B. Facey.
Okay.
That's a book I think that should be read, mandatory reading. Almost a lifetime ago, I sold a lot of real estate, and at one stage, thanks to Neil Genman, I got into the top 10 in Australia. I sold a lot of real estate.
Uh-huh.
And apart from Neil Genman, I credit Brian Tracy's book Maximum Achievement as being a guidance on how to really sell. And Psalms, Proverbs for the spiritual growth, the Fast 800 from Dr. Michael Mosley, and have been whittling away from the kilos. So far, 12 kilos in just a tick over 6 weeks. So
that's awesome.
Incredible shrinking man.
Nice one.
And a shout out to Todd Herman and the Alter Ego Effect, Stephen Kotler, The Rise of Superman, Working and Achieving Flow State, and Grit by Angela Duckworth.
Nice.
So there's some books for your listeners if they're scratching around for something to read. There's some great reads there.
Love it. We will make sure that there are links to all of those in the show notes for this episode over at yourstrataproperty.com.au. That's excellent, Chris. You're a nicely rounded man now, even though you are 12 kilos lighter. Well-rounded, well-educated, and training for this Ironman for next year as well. Goodness, I think you told me off air you're up at 4 a.m. to be able to fit all that in.
Yeah, I get up early. Some days earlier than others, but it's a commitment. You know, my kids are now grown up. I have a little bit more time So time to rebuild me. So this is what this year is. Michael Hyatt, best year yet. There's another book.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Good on you. All right. Well, let our listeners know how they find out more about you and if there's anything you'd like to add before we wrap up.
Well, look, it's just been fantastic, Amanda. You're one of my heroes. I think the way you go about presenting your Strata property and the podcast and the resources you make available, I know I've mentioned it before, but it's just a fantastic service you offer us all. And you do it all without an invoice. You know, not everything has to have an invoice attached to it, and you do that. And so thanks. If people want to hook up with me, I'm on LinkedIn. And they can do that. Occasionally I write articles there. One of my longer term goals to perhaps create a little bit more content like yourself.
Great.
And building management, it's an important part. It's an evolving job, but it's also one of the most exciting places to work. You know, you're dealing with people, and no 2 days are ever the same unless you've got major rubbish chute problems, but all in all, it's a wonderful field to be working in. So thanks for your time. Thanks for the invite.
Thank you so much, Chris. Thank you for sharing your very actionable, practical tips and making sure that we are all very well aware of what makes an excellent building manager. And I wish you all the best for continuing in this crazy world that is Strata title. I think anybody who's involved from any perspective, whether it's lawyers or Strata managers or even committee members, building managers, we all have our way of saying, you know what, this is tough and it is fast moving and it is fast changing, but it is very interesting and it is very exciting. So that's why I do what I do, and look forward to seeing what the future holds for you.
Yeah. Okay. We'll come back in 12 months.
Sounds good. Thanks, Chris.
Good on you, Anna. Bye.
Thank you for listening to Your Strata Property, the podcast which consistently delivers to property owners reliable and accurate information about their strata property. You can access all the information below this episode via the show notes at www.yourstrataproperty.com.au. You can also ask questions in the comments section, which Amanda will answer in her upcoming episodes. How can Amanda help you today?